Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson are going into year 2 together, and the expectations are sky high in the Windy City after last year's divisional round loss to the Los Angeles Rams. With Williams going into year 3, it could be his time to become a true superstar in this league and have a real breakout season in 2026. In this video, I'm going to explore the roster and coaching staff around Caleb to see just how much of the situation around him is going to help him or hold him back in 2026. This is a huge season for Caleb Williams, so I'm very interested to see what next season looks like in Chicago. So let's get right into it. Starting off with the skill positions, I have to say, this might be the best collection of young talent in the entire league, just in terms of skill positions. Rome Odunze and Luther Burton is a great young duo at receiver, and then you're looking at the tight end room of Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet. I know Cole Kmet is kind of taking a back seat these past couple years since Loveland has gotten there, but you figure that's a really great tight end room as well. And of course, when you're looking at Odunze and Burton, I still think Odunze can be a top receiver in this league, one of the most productive receivers in this league. And then Luther Burton, really strong 2025 season. So of course, we'll see what the future holds for him as well, just building with Caleb. And that's kind of the thing with a lot of these guys. With Rome, with Luther, with Colston, a lot of these guys, they even brought in Khalif Raymond, Scotty Miller in free agency, Davion Thomas out of LSU in the 3rd round in the draft. A lot of these guys are just going to need to build rapport with Caleb over these years. And I know we're talking about 2026 here, and I am going to give this skill position a really good grade here, but I just think the sky is the limit for these guys with all these young picks, these high picks that they've had, and of course Caleb being the number 1 overall pick, and the sky is just the limit with that guy. But in terms of just the skill positions around Caleb this year, I think the Bears have a lot going for them. I didn't even talk about the running room of DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monongai. That's a pretty nice 1-2 punch behind Caleb Williams as well. So just anywhere you look on this offense, not a real weak spot in terms of the skill positions, and that is why I am going to give this group a 8 out of 10 for the skill positions surrounding Caleb Williams going into 2026. I just think there's a ton to work with here, and I know some of it is projection based, but we've seen Odunze, we've seen Luther Burton in the league, we've seen Colston Loveland in the league. I'm not projecting a lot of rookies going forward, and I have at least seen them work with Caleb in the league, and I think 2026, of course, we're going to talk about Ben Johnson later, but just going into year 2, year 3 in terms of like Rome Odunze with Caleb, I think there's a sky's limit, and 8 out of 10, I think that's a very appropriate grade going into the season. I think this is a fantastic collection of young talent, and it certainly gives Caleb a lot to work with going into 2026. Now moving on to the offensive line, the Bears have 2 great young tackles in Darnell Wright and Ozzie Trapillo. Obviously, Trapillo, hopefully he can get healthy at some point this year. I don't know how well that looks right now because they did sign Jedrick Wills coming over from Cleveland. So I don't know how well that looks that Trapillo is going to come back and play this season necessarily. But if you would get him back, you have 2 great young tackles, like I said, with Darnell Wright and him as well. Jedrick Wills coming in, I think he's going to play admirable football. I think he's going to be fine over there. And him and Darnell Wright are going to be a good tackle pairing. When you're looking at the inside of this offensive line, Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson played every single snap at the guard spots for Chicago last season in 2025, and you're bringing both of those guys back. So that's really nice. And of course, not that either of those guys are superstars or top 5 offensive linemen, even at their positions and whatnot, but super solid players. Obviously, if you can count on them for 17 games last season, you're really like being able to bring them back this year in 2026. And then to fill out the offensive line, they brought in Garrett Bradbury coming over from New England, and he also started all 17 games for New England in 2025. So the entire middle of their offensive line started every single game in 2025. And then you pair that with the tackle pairing of Darnell Wright and presumably Jedrick Wills. I think this is going to be a pretty good offensive line, so I'm going to give this group a 6 out of 10 going into the season. Obviously, if you were able to add Trapillo back to this offensive line, even as just a 6 tackle, that swing tackle, or making Jedrick Wills that 6 swing tackle, that would obviously raise the grade a little bit higher, but a 6 out of 10, I think that's really good, and I think it's going to be an above average group blocking in front of Caleb Williams this year going into 2026. So now let's talk about this defense, and this was by far the hardest area of this roster to grade for me, just from an overall standpoint. And let's start up front. The depth up front is a little bit concerning to me at least. Grady Jarrett played in 14 games in 2025, and he's going into his age 33 season. So, of course, age concerns there. Some of these big guys, they can play for a long time. You look at like Calais Campbell and guys like that. But sometimes when it just falls off with these guys, it just falls off. And, of course, was healthy most of last season, but maybe a little bit cause for concern there with Grady Jarrett. And then you talk about some of their other big-name guys. Montez Sweat played in all 17 last year in 2025, had 27 pressures, according to Pro Football Reference. So, super solid season there. And then also Gervon Dexter Sr. played all 17 as well last year, and he had 22 pressures from the inside, and that is really great. So I think those top 3 players, if you can get a good Grady Jarrett this year, that would be a huge improvement from the grade that I'm going to give this defense. Not that I'm going to give them a bad grade or anything like that, but if you can get a really top tier, I know you're not going to get a, back when Grady Jarrett was playing, in Atlanta and whatnot, but if you can get a good Grady Jarrett performance this year, paired with Gervon Dexter Sr. and Montez Sweat, I think that can be 3 solid guys that you can go to up front. Of course, Jarrett and Dexter Sr. kind of playing more towards the middle, and Sweat being more of an edge rusher. And then talking about the edge rushers, the other guy on the other side of Sweat is projected to be Austin Booker, and he has to take a huge step in 2026. And I think a lot of that reason, to me at least, is the depth behind him leaves a lot to be desired. We're talking about guys like Daniel Hardy and Odeo Bingo are players that are in-house guys that are projected to play big roles this season. They also brought in Neville Gallimore and Kentavious Street to help on the inside as well for kind of depth in behind Grady Jarrett and behind Gervon Dexter. So just a lot of projection up front. Of course, if, like I said, if you can get the best out of Dexter, Jarrett, Sweat, get some really good seasons, I think this defense can be very fine. Because in terms of the rest of the defense, I really like what they have done. Devin Bush pairing with TJ Edwards, I think that's going to be a really good linebacker duo, especially if Edwards can stay healthy. I think he only played 10 or 11 games in 2025. And then you're looking at the secondary. In my opinion, this secondary is phenomenal. The outside corners of Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevens is a great combo, a great young combo. And having those 2 players obviously allows Kyler Gordon to play that nickel role, play that star defender role, which he is just outstanding at. And then they completely revamped the safety room after losing Kevin Byard to New England and Jaquan Brisker to Pittsburgh. And they even lost CJ Gardner-Johnson to Buffalo this offseason. So they completely overhauled the safety room by adding Kobe Bryant and Cam Lewis in free agency. And then they used their first-round pick on Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon. And Kobe Bryant was one of my favorite free agents this entire offseason. So I love what they did with their safety room. And I think this defense is going to be at least average. So I am going to give them a 5 out of 10 to start this season. Of course, like I said, if you can get some of that depth in behind the guys up front to really play some good snaps for you, this defense can be really, really good. Because I love the secondary. I really like their linebackers of bringing in Devin Bush, pairing with TJ Edwards. I think that can be a pretty good linebacker duo. And to me, it really is just all about the front and how high that can take this defense this season. But I am going to stick with 5 out of 10 heading into 2026 for the defense playing opposite of Caleb Williams. So finally, let's talk about the coaching of this team. Ben Johnson is going into his 2nd season as a head coach in the NFL, as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. And in my opinion, he is already one of the best head coaches in the entire NFL. He had this Bears team competing way faster than what I thought he could. I understand he has a first overall pick in Caleb Williams at his disposal. But just turning around the franchise as quick as he has, of course, we'll see what this season was. Maybe it was a one-hit wonder, you could say. You have to do it again in the NFL. You have to prove it again and again. But in my opinion, from what I've seen so far from Ben Johnson, already one of the best head coaches in the NFL. He waited to get the job that he wanted. He didn't just take any old job. He didn't just take whatever the Giants job a few years ago or whatever jobs he's interviewed for. He waited. He took the Chicago job and went forward with a purpose, without a doubt. So I could sit here and gush about Ben Johnson probably the rest of the video. I could gush another probably 10 minutes about the guy. I think he's a great head coach in this league, but I definitely can't wait to see how he brings Caleb along in year 2 into the system, in year 3 for Caleb, and how this whole thing progresses. Dennis Allen is going to be the DC going into his 2nd season with the Bears and with Ben Johnson after a very, very long tenure with the Saints as the defensive coordinator and the head coach. And I really like this pairing because he's a very reliable coordinator that kind of just lets Ben Johnson handle his side of the ball. Johnson knows that he can just check in midweek with Dennis Allen, make sure everything's going good with the game plan, and it's going to be good to go on the defensive side of the ball, and Ben Johnson can just take care of the offense. And you see that with a lot of these successful programs. You think about the Chiefs with Andy Reid and Spags. Obviously, those guys have won a ton of Super Bowls together, and I think that's just the way to do it. And I think it's especially valuable for Ben Johnson to have a guy like Dennis Allen because he's probably not going to get a head coaching job again. So you could really have your defensive coordinator stay with you if you're Ben Johnson for the long haul for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years if you're there that long. And I think that's just a very valuable thing. So I'm going to give this coaching staff an 8 out of 10 surrounding Caleb Williams. And I think I've made that very apparent why I think that. I think Ben Johnson is a great head coach, great situation having Dennis Allen as his DC, and just a very good setup around this young quarterback and Caleb Williams. So I think an 8 out of 10 is suitable for this Chicago Bears coaching staff heading into 2026. In my opinion, this looks like it should be a pretty favorable situation for Caleb heading into the upcoming season. My final grade for the Chicago Bears roster and coaching staff around their quarterback is a 27 out of 40 possible points, or a 68%. meaning that I like 68% of what is going to surround Williams this fall, and the other 32% not so much. This upcoming season is going to be huge for the entire Chicago Bears organization. In my opinion, one of two things will happen this fall. Either the Bears will have a great season and Caleb Williams is thought of one of the top quarterbacks in the entire league, or it's more inconsistent play from their quarterback and another year of waiting for Bears fans. And as you can see, I have the Caleb Williams situation ranked as my number one situation out of all the other teams' quarterback situations that I've covered on the channel so far. So if you want to check out any of the other situations I've covered and you're wondering how I got those numbers, you can check out the channel and there's a playlist as well. You can check out all the videos there. And with that, thank you for watching.